This is a great episode coming up for BarryT's Garage. We get to take you along to Pomona, California, see the all-stars of Zephyrs, 20 absolutely gorgeous Zephyrs. And the cool thing is doing some video, learning about them, and showing you this wide variety of, I don't think this has ever happened before, not that anybody alive can seem to remember that many Zephyrs being in one place, at one show, in one area, at one time. So that's pretty cool. So here we go. Let's have some fun.
This is Ray Dunham. He is responsible for this entire affair. He called all of us on the phone and as a spellbinder. And even though I never met the man, he said, would you please bring your car to our show? That's all he had to do. It's like the music. So I did it, and I couldn't be happier that I did it and came all the way from Arizona. So.
Well, thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
He really was an incredible group of other people as well.
Well, our pleasure to have you and the entire group.
Yep. This is a car built for James Hetfield of Metallica, the rock group, and was commissioned. It was built approximately, 15 years ago? It's fair to say this is, if you're going to do a custom, this would be a pretty good job. Subsequent to that, Hetfield donated many of his cars to the Peterson Museum, and now there's an exhibit at the Peterson, and when the car is in residence, you can go see it in person. It is really breathtaking. Great job, I think. Everything's been welded together, as you note. The fenders don't come off anymore. The whole body is just faired in, and instead of just using Bondo or something, they welded it, did a proper job. A couple of brothers that did the work, and it's beautiful metal work.
Marcel.
The Marcel brothers did it and did a really incredibly good job, but they're a very talented group of people.
So the things that I'm noticing is there's a wide strip of chrome compared to
right. Now that's handmade. You're better to start with a solid piece of metal. That tail is very subtle and it's underplayed, which is kind of uncommon in a lot of custom cars. They want to, everything's got to be over the top. No, wrong. This car doesn't want to be treated that way. It's beautiful in its own right, and they've really done an excellent job of complementing it.
So the fenders have been lengthened, the skirts have been opened up and lengthened. It's got somewhat of a resemblance of a 39 Zephyr taillight, which is custom.
Right.
Clearly it's chopped. As JB had stated, the fenders and running boards are molded, the running boards are reshaped. And then, as you discussed, the trim wraps around the car into that bumperette. And then everything from the exterior has been removed: door handles, trunk handles, license plate mount, etc.
A good designer will always tell you when you're looking at something from the point of view it's already been built. The question is, what can you take off of it, not what can you add to it. And that's what proper design is supposed to look like.
Especially with a car like this, because factory, they're so beautiful to start with.
They were a great place to start. So why are you messing with what already works? The answer is you shouldn't. You complement it. You complement the various design cues and carry it forward. And this is a perfect example of how to do it properly.
So this is a 39, very mild custom. One of the subtle changes that most people wouldn't notice is the fenders are slightly widened. I think they're widened 2 inches on each side.
Yep.
He also made custom running boards because on a 39, the bottom of the door is actually a part of the running board. It's unchopped, but as you can see, it's lowered. But the main body modifications are the widening of the fenders and the running boards. But beautiful example of a mild custom.
Yeah, this is Jim Orr's car, and Alan Deckers that was the builder. Was a close friend. We just lost him, but this is a perfect example where Alan doesn't see limitations; he sees possibilities. But he knows when to stop. So if you look at this, I'll bet you 90% of the people walk by here, they don't know those fenders have been widened front and rear. But he wanted to get a wider stance on it. It's got a modern underpinning, and that played into the idea of a wider car. And in Alan's mind, well, I just section the fenders and flare it on. He's a master welder, master fabricator. You look at it, you can't tell.
And coincidentally, one of the legends amongst the Lincoln Zephyr community, Merv Atkins, had previously owned this car before Jim took ownership.
Yeah.
Okay. I've heard that name.
Yeah.
This took 25 years, by the way. But really glad It's got one of those JB Donaldson steering wheels. That's the only thing that really works on this car. Just kidding. Oh, of
I'm
course.
gonna edit that part out.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah, we traded for it. I'm not sure I ever got paid on that deal.
So the next two cars are owned by the same gentleman, David Novello. This is a great example of a restored 39. No modifications whatsoever. Still has the original V12, original stance, hasn't been lowered, hasn't been touched. Back to original type interior, but again, a beautiful example of a 39. And then the next car, which we'll get to, is his 37, and you're gonna see that's more of a custom. David found this car in the valley here in Los Angeles, probably about 6 months back.
Really? That recently?
And yes, and it had been in the family for many, many years. The gentleman that owned it had passed. His wife had the car. And, you know, it wasn't in this condition when David got it. He obviously cleaned up the paint, did some mechanical work, new tires, and got it to this condition. But it's a beautiful example of a restored 39 three-window coupe.
Yeah, it did a really nice job.
This is a resto rod, I guess you could say. All appearances show that it's back to original other than the stance. The car sits on air ride suspension, it's very low, and it has a modern drivetrain with a modern V8 engine. But independent of it being lowered and the drivetrain that you can't actually see, it's restored back to original.
Now, the nuances on these cars makes it fascinating, and there's never been a gathering like this ever. So instead of a bunch of original cars being invited to a Lincoln meet and probably not welcome any customs to that event, and vice versa, if you had a custom event, you wouldn't invite a bunch of original cars.
This is a great combination. Why not?
This is the guy who figured it out.
It works perfectly.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's nothing wrong with any of them. In fact, there's a lot of beauty here, a lot of good design, a lot of care.
Honestly, I think it gives the person who appreciates the original car an opportunity to appreciate a custom,
Right.
and the individual that
Right.
appreciates the custom to appreciate an unmodified car.
It's well said.
Yeah.
A lot of times we live in separate worlds, and that's
Absolutely.
it's nonsense. We all love Zephyrs in one way or another, so this is an opportunity finally to meet each other, because we don't get to see these people. They live all over the planet, and this guy right here brought them together.
It was a
And-
group effort.
Yeah, right. Okay, fine.
I will say this, none of this would exist if each individual owner didn't bring their car.
Yeah, that's
including
exactly
JB.
right.
So that's what makes it work.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's the people in the community are all aware of each other.
Sure.
So reaching out and locating them is not that challenging. If you were outside of the community and you were starting from scratch,
Yeah, it'd be
it
very
might be a
difficult.
little more difficult.
Right. But there's an element of trust involved, so that they know that he's well intended, and
Well, and also it's a little referral selling. You share with one person that this person's coming, and when they recognize that person's name, they feel like they need to be a part of it.
it's called chumming.
Yes.
You
Now,
throw
real quick, before we move on, I guess things like the spotlight, the antenna, the fog lights, those all would have been possible in 37.
Accessories, I believe.
Accessories.
I'm not sure about the antenna.
Okay.
It's hard-
JB?
Yeah, that would be an aftermarket antenna available at the time, and anything that's period correct is probably acceptable in a case like this, because it is a mild custom.
Yes.
And as long as the stuff on it is mild custom, you can't put late model stuff on a 30s car. It just looks ridiculous.
And the spotlight is era correct, but the original accessory for this car is called a sport light, and it mounts slightly different. But again, this is a mild custom. I know David, there wouldn't be anything on this car that wasn't era correct.
Okay.
So I'm assuming all of it is.
Yeah,
Alright.
it's a great model and an example if you're trying to decide what you want to do with a car, not just with a Lincoln Zephyr, but the rules of the game are simple. It has to work visually, and if it looks out of date or it looks like it's 40 years later, leave it alone. Don't buy it. Don't, for God's sake, don't put it on the car.
All right, now while we're talking about accessories, this is the only car at the show that I know of that has that.
That's the only one I know of too. That guy JB doesn't have one of those.
There's a lot of resentment going on here.
Okay,
I got to
so-
tell you.
So this is a gentleman, Ray Dunham's car, one of two. What makes this car unique actually is the fact that it's a two-door sedan. Most people don't even connect that it's a two-door sedan. They just immediately assume it's a four-door,
Right.
because it has a very similar shape to the four-door. But in 1937, the two-door sedan was the lowest production car that Lincoln made. As far as the luggage rack, that's an extremely rare accessory because it was only made in 1937. And what we've found is you can sometimes locate the racks, but all the mounting hardware isn't there. And to me, that's an indication that somebody mounted them on the car and then decided they needed to remove the rack for some reason or another, and the two were never combined again.
Right. Which is sad, really, because they're really beautiful.
The racks probably were disposed, I mean, not the racks, but the mounting hardware were left on the cars when the cars got damaged or whatever.
Yeah.
They never reunited.
So there's only a handful of those left on the planet.
We did one body modification to it. If you notice, this is one of the few cars that doesn't have a skirt, if not the only car. So I wanted to run the car without the skirt for a different look. But when you remove the skirt, the wheel opening is probably another 12 inches back. And you have a shot of the inside of the fender. It's just exposed, it doesn't look right. So we did a slight body modification trying to maintain a similar line and fill in that space.
It's very tastefully done and almost invisible, which is...
Thank you, JB. And that was the plan. So...
I didn't pick up on it until he just explained that to me.
Yeah, again, that's the only body modification. Now again, the car's been lowered. It's got an updated chassis in it. You know, the spotlights are aftermarket, but they're the early style Appletons.
Right. But this is a good example of how you can do some minor things to a car, but when you have to learn when to stop, and that's where a lot of people lose it. They just keep going and going and going and going. And there's a point at which the car starts going backwards, literally.
And so you just got some footage of the interior. When I did the interior, the plan was to make it look like it might have been an original interior,
right,
without using the original fabric. So I used the same pattern, you know, with pleats, and I found some early material that I thought was really suited to the style of what it would look like.
Yeah. Period correct, but it's modern, right?
Yeah.
So it'll wear better. The early stuff is very fragile, and if you really want to drive a car, and these cars get driven. This is not some trailer queen group.
It's got seatbelts.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you want to drive it and you're going to sit on that seat, it better not fall apart.
The wing window that you just pointed at, on all of the other cars, you'll see more of the like quarter moon shaped, which were an accessory offered by Lincoln. I'm not sure where these came from. I don't know the background, but I have been told they were an early accessory, and because they were on the car when I got it,
no, they just
I
look
left
good.
it.
They look good.
I also was told that the glass was too long because it exceeds the frame. But once again, that was what was on the car.
Yeah.
So I wasn't about to change it.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful thing about Zephyrs. Nobody really knows, and that's the way you want to keep it.
That's right.
And then the final...
We're acting like experts, but in the end of the day, these cars will fool you, and they'll keep surprising you, which is part of the wonder of them, actually.
And then one final thing was the hubcaps. These are 36...
Could you help me get these off? You've got a screwdriver?
1936, 37 accessory hubcaps.
Yeah.
I have a friend...
The Holy Grail.
...that has a black one on his spare in his trunk. That makes absolutely no sense. No, and
that would be me.
This is another interesting fact. Another gentleman within the Zephyr community who's very well known purchased a set of 4 of these on eBay about 2 years back for $10,400.
Yeah. And they're double that now, if you could find a set. Yeah, this is a car that started out as a 4-door, and probably couldn't find a coupe, couldn't find a roadster, so they made their own.
So the plan was to make a roadster?
Well,
they lengthened the doors. They tied in the tops of the doors with the dash like a roadster because there's no glass.
Right.
Made the padded top. It took the original windshield frame off.
That's a Carson top, right?
Yeah.
Removable.
Yeah.
It doesn't fold. And if anybody's ever owned a convertible, you know why folding tops are marginal use. So and again, it's very tastefully done. I'm not a custom guy, but I do respect balance and the way that the top is not squished. It's very well done, actually. And they did it in suede, which is actually attractive, and they kept the colors at a minimum. They got deep red, which works really well with black. So that's really good. We'll find something wrong with one of these cars, won't we?
Well,
It may take a while.
as an owner of cars,
Yeah,
we
it's
all
not-
know where the flaws are because that's all
But
we
it's
ever
not
see.
wrong if you love it. If you love it, then it's good. It's your choice.
Well, it's a great example of a custom.
It really is. I mean, it's
It's a custom, but you instantly know
Right.
it's a 37 Zephyr.
Oh, yeah.
but it's understated, and that's what's different about distinctly different than a Ford, as for instance, which is kind of similar. A 36 and 7 is very similar,
Okay.
but you know immediately that that's a Zephyr.
This is my second car that I have at the show,
Yes.
and this started off, and I know the purists are going to kill me, as a 39 three-window coupe.
Ooh.
So we did the opposite of what most people do. We created a 5-window in the process of making a fastback. We narrowed an original front bumper and put it on the rear. We put 47 Cadillac taillights on it. The goal with the taillights was people typically put very small taillights on customs. We wanted something very bold.
Yeah.
We kept the original rear window. We just laid it down. We created the spine between the windows.
Yeah. Which works.
Lengthened the doors, made our own trim, lengthened the fenders, custom running boards.
This is a car you were involved in from the beginning.
I bought it as a project, but then
Okay.
it was,
Then you-
14 years.
Okay.
So original dash, we pulled the waterfall section out. We also made that heater box cover out of like late 40s, I think Continental. We took 3 and
Ooh.
grafted them together. That was a project.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could look at this and say that if there was a dream car from the factory, they were trying to project where a car was going to go, they might do something just about like this.
The door panels, I wanted to use like, a striped herringbone wool with the camel, but I didn't want to put it on the seat because I want to drive it, and I didn't want
It's
to
not
be
practical.
dealing with
It's
the
not practical.
fabric on the seat.
Yeah, because it damages easily.
Yeah. Now you can see this is the wing window that I talked about. That's more of the quarter moon shape. We had to fabricate that because the car's chopped to make it work, but you get the idea, and you'll see
Yep.
that on some of the other cars. We also split the windshield.
Whoa! I didn't pick up on that.
Yeah.
Right away. That's kind of cool.
We made all the trim, the badging, which is typically red. I did in that brown color, along with the K-car hubcap medallions. And then I had the lenses done, which you've already seen in the 47 Cadillac
Right.
taillights, a similar tone.
Now the motor might take a separate episode.
No, you know what? Honestly, when I got the car, it was already started, the project, but it had a brand new crate motor, 350. The V12 was no longer. So my goal was really to dress it. From an appearance standpoint, it was styled to go with the type of car it is. It's got an automatic transmission, all modern suspension, air ride suspension, etc.
Very clean work,
Thank you.
it really is. And
Although it didn't get JB's vote, so I didn't win.
uh-oh. Okay, now tell us about the rock arm covers, because those
what?
The rock arm covers are special, right?
The valve covers, those are Lincoln Y block
Yes.
valve covers.
Right.
They literally slide right over the top of the factory valve covers. So we welded
Oh my
studs
goodness.
on the top of the factory valve covers, threaded
Incredible.
studs, slid them on there, and
Yeah.
everything works.
No.
Inside the oil filter canister
Yeah.
is just like a
Regular.
VW remote screw-on oil filter.
Now tell us about the air cleaner, because that's really cool.
Yeah, that's off a late 40s Lincoln. We gutted all the oil bath parts that were inside.
Right.
We drilled half-dollar holes all the way around the bottom of it for air, and there's a K&N air filter in the inside.
Wonderful.
Make it practical. Now this is beautiful here. Who made that? Do you recall?
Well, all
That-
this, the car was built by a friend of mine. His name is Steve Wilk.
Okay.
So,
That's some pretty work right
you
there.
know, nobody wants to look at the front of the radiator and the fans
Nah,
and
it's
everything.
ugly.
So we made that panel. These lines were already here, so we just kind of followed it, and that was the design that we came up with.
Nice.
And the goal wasn't to have like everything super chrome and done. So this is Roger Odell's 1938. Mine is a 1939. The front ends factory are the same width. You can clearly see the difference in the width of
Oh my
how
gosh,
wide
yeah.
Roger's car is.
Wow.
The fact that he has the front fender skirts allows him to have full turning radius based on the width of the car. But this is highly modified. He finished it in the late 90s. It's still in wonderful condition.
Where did he get those headlight lenses?
I'm sure he made them.
Oh, I see. They're made out of stainless flat bar.
He's got rear fender skirts in the front. You can see the total change in shape of the fender itself comes into the door. The door opens suicide, and this whole section of the fender opens with the door. Yeah.
Otherwise, you couldn't open the door.
And the running boards have been significantly shortened. I'm not sure what that dash is out of. Maybe a 60s Chrysler.
62 Chrysler.
Yeah.
300.
Yeah. And like my car, this is one of the others here. And as far as I know, there's only like 3 or 4 that have ever been made into fastbacks.
And this is properly done. If you stand back and look at it, the lines.
Oh, yeah, it's beautiful.
The lines are right on the money.
Yeah. Boyd Coddington made one years ago, the yellow and silver 37.
Okay.
And then there's been a couple others. And then this whole rear section is just
it's all created
almost like the
scratch.
the Batmobile, but it's just so cool for what the car is.
But it's understated. It doesn't look goofy.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
When I first saw this car years ago, I thought it was one of the glass body cars. And I, was
scraped,
a little turned off.
Yeah.
And I found that it was an all steel car, and then I was truly amazed with
Yeah,
it.
because this represents thousands of man hours. I mean, you don't do that out of metal.
And Roger's been around the community for many, many years.
What's his last name?
Odell.
Odell.
Yes.
This is a stock car that hasn't been modified in any way I can tell. Kind of tells you what you got when you got a brand new one. You got a car that looked like a custom car. When you drove down the street in 1938 or 9, nobody recognized the car, and that was part of its charm. So it didn't look like a Ford, it didn't look like a Chevy, it didn't look like anything. It just looked like a Lincoln Zephyr. And since Edsel people designed them with absolutely no concern about cost, the metalwork on that car right there, you could buy some houses for what that cost.
Absolutely.
These guys got it for the price of the car. But the tooling and the complexity of a round car like this is mind-numbing. It was true then, and it's true now. So that's why you're so fortunate if you find one of these.
As much as you're amazed by the custom cars, to look at a stock car and realize how amazing that
how beautiful.
is.
Yeah,
right?
you just isolate them and you start to see. You can't compare them. There's no way you can do that.
Here's another observation. When you look at the original car, and you look at when people customize the 36 Fords or the 37, 38 Chevys, they're trying to create this silhouette that was done factory from Lincoln.
Right. They've seen one, they couldn't afford to buy one. Well, they're very rare anyway. So they took those same design cues, like he was pointing out, and tried to integrate them into their cars. And that was very true. After these cars were probably 10 years old, they started mimicking those lines, because now it's soaked into kind of the fabric of custom cars. Yeah, this is a very, very low miles original. It's owned by Robert Logan, and
thank you.
This is very close to as original as it gets. That even the upholstery is original, which is unheard of. When you consider how fragile that mohair is. It's lived a charmed life, I can tell you that. I think if anything, the paint's been polished, but other than that, it's just about dead on original. It's got the rear vent windows. These are options. People have been known to kill for a set of these. We have a guy that sleeps down here and just watches them all night.
When I bought mine, I think I paid $900 for the pair like 15 years ago.
Right. You couldn't touch
Today
them.
they're like $3,000 a pair.
This
car and the next car are owned by father-son. This is Gus Jr. It's a 40 convertible custom. It's got a 39 headlight on it with a peak put into the top of the fender to tie into the headlight bezel. And then the car has been chopped with a custom top. And then obviously it's lowered, the stance, etc. But independent of the front fender, the chop and being lowered, it's all original.
Now, is this an operating top or is it a Carson removable top?
Operating top. And he converted it to electronic. So it opens and closes electronically.
Wow. That is a huge undertaking.
And this car is still in process, but it's very
Yeah.
cool for what it is.
Yeah, well, it doesn't have to apologize for anything.
Correct.
What's motivating the car? What kind of engine does it have?
So I think it still has the original V12.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah.
That shows great perseverance. We ought to know,
Yeah.
based on recent experience.
Yes. Very recent.
That was a driver error problem, and I happen to be the driver, so I know how that works.
So the next
There is
car
another
here,
luggage.
so this is Gus Senior's car, and this is a 39 convertible. And again, it's a custom. You can see it's got a custom rack. That's not a original Lincoln accessory, but it's something from that era. The car's been chopped. Obviously, it's lowered. Independent of that, it's pretty much original. The still has the V12 in it with the 3-speed transmission.
Yeah, people poo-poo these things, but when they're built right, I have a 3-speed car, and it's just as usable as the automatic car. I don't see a whole lot of difference. I wouldn't want to get in a drag race because we'd find out who was faster. But
Well, you don't want to race my 2-door sedan, though.
no, probably
It's
not.
got a supercharged LS.
No, I probably don't want to do that. I like it right where it is. But this is a nice original. You can see some of the patina. You know, people try to fake old paint jobs all the time, but you can't do that if you study the nuances of it. You can see that the paint goes through an aging process.
Yeah, checking.
It does. It checks a little bit. It gets a little blistery. Now you can sand and buff it, but you're going to go through the primer pretty quickly. This guy is, I've just met him, I'll be honest with you. But I got to tell you, if there's, like my mother used to say to my wife when we first met, she said, honey, I can tell you one thing about this guy. There'll never be a bored moment in your life. And I got to say that would follow with him.
Now we're going to expect a lot of people have seen this car in our videos, but
Yes.
maybe not. This might be the first Zephyr video they happen to see.
It might be because
We just need one question answered. Why
Yes.
is the luggage sitting on the ground?
that is because I'm showing off. I have an ego problem, and I'm trying to tell them I've got luggage. Where's yours?
It's for short passengers to step up.
That's
Exactly.
right. If you step on that, you could probably die. We've seen this car a lot when it was being built, but it's been sitting around.
Tell us about this car briefly.
Well, we did it 2 or 3 years ago. We talked about selling it, and then we talked about not selling it, and we vacillate on that subject because there's so much personal time in it and so many really good memories associated with this car. I took my wife out to dinner in it the other night, and it was magical. It was wonderful. Everywhere we went, everybody treated it like royalty. So it's a really neat car. It runs the drive, still got the original 12. It's it has a 9-inch rear end and it's modern underneath, but we tried to do it in such a way you really couldn't tell. And I think we pulled it off.
Transmission?
It has an automatic transmission, a C4 automatic, has the original V12, and we loaded up the plugs coming here, so it didn't run really well. And then one of the guys here was kind enough to take the plugs out, clean it up, and put them back in. So we're confident it'll run now because it's going to have to make the trip home. But it's just a really good driving car, really is.
This is the original scrape car. It's owned by Barry Wise. Those of you that recognize that name, Barry is one of the characters on Storage Wars. This car is iconic because it was built by a gentleman named Terry Cook, early 2000s. And again, it could be perceived as a glass-bodied car, but when Terry built this car, it was all steel. He used this as a template to pull molds off of, and he did actually make the glass-body cars. And the name of those cars and company was Deco Rides, but this was originally, or is, a full steel car. When it first came out, it was one of the first cars with air ride suspension, very low, as you can see. And it was actually purple with moon discs on it. Hot Wheels were made after it. I mean, it was a very well-known car. Since Barry's taken ownership, and here it is over 20 years later, he's changed the color to black and made some minor changes to it, but it's still known as Scrape.
And I think what he's done to it is actually fix it. The car doesn't need to be a loud, obnoxious color.
Correct.
It's a beautiful body, and if you stop putting too loud a paint work on a car, and the work and the craftsmanship and the design can handle it, you start to see the difference. This car to
Doesn't need it.
It doesn't need it, doesn't even want it. Just leave me alone is what it's screaming. It's beautiful, it's black, everything flows, the design work is flawless. It's not overcooked. And you know, there are cars here that are done that way and cars that aren't.
And this car being a 39, I believe it has 41 grills on it.
Right. Which
39 headlights without the bezel.
You got to remember this is a totally different shape. So the whole car had to be made to reconfigure just to made up to those grills.
A nice comparison would be to have Roger Odell's car parked next to it. Because of the width of the two cars, I think they're comparable.
Yeah, they are. They're really wide, but this is a perfect case point where a dark color shrinks the car down. So if it's a little biggish in certain areas, the dark color makes it look correct because it shrinks the physical scale of it. If you do it in a bright color, a white color, God forbid some of these other things they're doing now, it really points out the car is very wide, which is not really what you want to do. It needs to be narrow and sleek and bad looking.
This is a great example of a restored back to original 37 four-door sedan. So you saw my two-door sedan. This is the four-door sedan. Very similar, a little bit bigger. Doors a little shorter on this car up front. It's owned by a gentleman named Ron Gomez. It's beautifully done. Still has the original chassis, drivetrain, V12, etc.
Yeah, the bodywork is just about close to flawless as near as I can tell. And ordinarily four-door sedans get short-sheeted sometimes. But you can see that this is the most common form that a Zephyr can come in, and it still has a sense of dignity and class. You can put this next to any other car in that era, and you would never, ever, if you had your choice, go pick the other one.
And the rear window is the same. The entire front climp's the same. The running boards are the same. The rear fender skirts, bumpers, everything in the interior as far as the steering, dash, gauges, everything translate to the 37.
Right.
And a lot of these components, the taillights, bumpers, dash, steering wheel, people use on non-Lincoln cars as customs.
Yeah. And
so unfortunately, these four doors have gone by the wayside,
yeah.
and I think have become more collectible.
Yeah, and it's still a pretty car, and if you have a family or you want to drag a lot of people around, this is a better option. One of Bob Kasner's cars, and I think it looks to be about as original.
Yes.
Got the fuzzy paint, so but look at the metal underneath it. It's obviously a very straight car. This is the kind of car you want to buy, frankly.
Bob purchased this car from Todd Calder.
Okay. Not too long ago? Recently? Well, it sure is a great car. I mean, this is kind of a neat example because you don't have to do anything to this car. Drive it and forget about all this, 5-year restorations and alterations. It's a perfectly usable car the way it is.
You could drive this car anywhere.
Yeah.
And somebody is always going to stop you and ask questions because it's so beautiful.
It really is. It's nothing ever been done to this car.
And it's also a great example of what a car can look like that doesn't have to be perfectly shiny and still have such great appeal.
Yeah, it has style, and it doesn't need, the bling to go with it. You see this out on the street, it just stops your heart, even in the rawest form.
This one stops my heart in the middle of all of our Zephyrs.
This one stops everybody's heart. This car was built by Jerry back east. The gentleman here in town, Bob Kasner, just bought it. And it is absolutely one of the finest cars, forget what type, that I've ever seen. I mean, the craftsmanship on this, the chrome plating, the bodywork, the originality of all of the elements.
We'll talk to the uniqueness of the car too, JB.
Yeah, there's only one of these was ever built, and it took him a while to document it, but Lincoln built a couple of convertibles. Remember that convertibles didn't exist in 37. So they said, let's build a couple of them, let's see how that works for development in 38. And that was also in flux, as it turned out. But the 37, they built two of them, they're pretty sure. This is one of them. And he was able to find it and spent, I think, 10 or 12 years, as near as I can tell, restoring it. And it's a magnificent car. All of it is this screams factory, but you know, I remember the factories had access to all of the body makers like Brunn and those guys, and they could make a car from nothing, just exactly what you see. This was a coupe turned into a convertible coupe by some really talented people at probably Brunn, and it's just a magnificent car. It's sad because it's the only convertible in existence.
In 1937.
They only built two. One of them is completely gone, and this is the last one.
Wow.
And it just tells you what a magnificent car it would have been if they'd built more. Really just masterful design.
So this is a 1940 full custom. It's owned by Voodoo Larry out of Chicago. You can see starting with the front, the split bumper. That was a custom treatment back in the day. The Appleton fog lights. Custom hubcap, car's been chopped, all the fenders and running boards, etc., are all molded to the car. It's got the, you know, mint green metallic custom paint, interiors all tuck and roll white custom. I mean, this screams like full custom.
Well, in my mind, it works. I'm not a fan of customs, but
Yeah.
if they're properly done, you can see what's the possibilities
Yeah,
are.
the paint's beautiful on it.
Yeah. It's got a lot of
Pearl, metallic.
pearl flake in it. And they did a nice job combining and changing a few things and integrating it. So, you know, you see some customs that really you wish you hadn't seen.
Oh yeah,
This is not one of them.
yes.
I mean, it's
agreed.
very, very well done. Clean, it's not overdone or underdone. So if you wanted an example of what could be done, these cars in their original form aren't worth a great deal. So this is really an upgrade in a way.
So this is John Barnes, 1937. Great example of an original restored car once again. Great color. Do you know the actual name of the color, JB?
No, it's got a name. I couldn't fetch it up at the moment, but it is a factory color. They didn't have a lot of metal flake in those days. So even though metal flake was around, it was very, very understudied. It wasn't large flake. But it started to add some iridescence to the paint, which
Drones.
now we just take for granted. But this was one of the few early cars. Buick did it, and Lincoln did it, but they were some of the first people to do it. Before that, paint was just paint. You painted it, it was a single color. They didn't have any metal flake in it, and didn't have the iridescence.
This is a beautiful example of a car that was probably restored many, many years ago, but you can tell based on the current condition that the owner is meticulous. It's a 39 three-window coupe, factory color. It's been in the family for many, many years, dated back to 1962.
Wow,
Um,
that is a long time. Well, it's
the
great.
gentleman who owns the car today, his name is Martin Anderson. His uncle owned the car, and his uncle owned the car for many years. He was the original owner back in 1962. That was when it was brought to the family. You can see on the door there his initials, which is just such a cool little treatment.
Oh yeah, you wonder how that survived all these years.
But Martin inherited the car in 2015 when his uncle passed, and I don't believe the engine was in it, and you know there was some work that needed to be done to it, but you can see he's done everything that needed to be done and done a wonderful job.
One of the things you notice about this car is that you can see how the polishing and sanding is rubbed through to the primer below it.
And this is the proud owner right here,
Yes, he
Martin
is.
Anderson.
Martin, thank you for doing that, and thank you for bringing it. Man, it's a fantastic car. It really is.
And as you know, we stated earlier, it's people like Martin bringing their cars to
Right.
an event like this that make it, because without them and their cars, there is no event. So we have a great appreciation. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, it really is. It's great to see it original. Now, a car, you know, it has a little patina to it, but it hasn't been messed with, and so you appreciate the way they came from the factory, right off the trailer. It's a beautiful car, and look at it's survived for all these years.
The final thing I'd like to say is I wanted to thank Yenry Herrera. He and I kind of partnered to this, along with John Buck, who promotes the show. But once again, Martin, JB, all the people that participated,
Yeah,
thank you to them. They made the show.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is a nice job.